If I may, there is a story from the Old Testament of Solomon, who was the wisest man in antiquity. And many of you may know this story, and if you do, I'd beg of you just to withhold the way you kind of remember it ending and the conclusions that we draw from it, because I think that's what's damaging. In this story, Solomon, who's king, and if there's no, there's the judiciary at that point in time is the king. So the king holds court, and people that have disagreements with each other, their neighbors or whoever, will come before the king, and they will bring that disagreement and ask the king to make the decision. In this story, there's two women that bring to the king, King Soleman, this child. Each woman, claims to be the mother of the child. Each mother claims that the other woman had a son that died and is now claiming her son to be her own. And in this story, in the Old Testament, also the Torah, and other holy books, Solomon, and forgive me, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but the concept is always the same. He either turns to the captain of the guard that's wearing this sword, or turns to the captain of the guard and says, "Give me this sword." In either event, what Solomon does is present the baby, and this is where we get the term split the baby. Why? Because Solomon turns to the guard or grabs the sword and says, "Hand me the baby," or hand the guard the baby. You women, it's okay. You can each get half a baby. Two mothers, two women claiming to be the mother of this infant will split the baby. You can each end up with half a baby. And we'll use the sword to do it. We all know what that would be like. One woman says, "Thank you. Let's do it. Yep. Get the baby. I want half a baby. I want that half of the baby. That's mine." Right? What's the other mother say? She says, "You know what? She can have the baby. She can have him." The incorrect conclusion that people often have told me, and I grew up in the church, Methodist church up in Pennsylvania, and I recall that story throughout my childhood being taught to me a lot. And the conclusion that the people that told me that story and told me what conclusion I ought to draw from that story seemed to indicate to me that the ending to this story had a particular conclusion that I now have a disagreement with. The ending to this story, when the woman says, "Give her the baby, don't cut her in," like you just give her the baby. What did Solomon do? Did he cut the baby in half and give two women a dead baby? No. The woman that was able to put aside her own needs and her own desires for the benefit of the child, which is really what motherhood is about. It's really what fatherhood's about too. She got the baby. Solomon says, "Give her the baby." The conclusion that is drawn, and I'm not saying everyone draws this conclusion, but the dangerous one is that true parents will sacrifice for the child. The issue that I have with this conclusion is it lets us off the hook right now. And especially many men and many mothers. Because the two people that usually end up in front of Solomon today are mothers and fathers about the child. And I've got, I don't know how many cases right now where they're arguing over whether or not the kid should do soccer or be in the band. And a lot of times it's the visitation fathers, the parenting time fathers that get the child at a limited amount of time whether it's Saturday through Sunday, Friday through Sunday, Friday to the morning of school, and then one dinner visit one weekend. That's every other weekend, right? Every other Friday to Sunday, or every other Friday after school to Monday morning at school, and one dinner visit every weekend, like every week, like one week night for 2 to 3 hours. That's to a certain extent what many men get as a general consensus. Like that's almost like where you start from. However, the frustration that men are having is that they're not being considered for more time with the children. And so then we start fighting over ridiculous stuff, like you didn't talk to me about whether or not the kid could go into soccer. Now, sometimes there are legitimate gripes. Could we talk about this? Can the child go to a different soccer team that would be easier for me to make? Is there a different soccer team that has practice on different nights of the week that I could also make? There are things that we could do between the parents. However, the vitriol and the inability to communicate or to have healthy conflict, or for men to not feel like they're just being looked at as a piggy bank or a purse or money. This is where the rubber is meeting the road with some of these really bad custody and visitation cases, and it's only getting worse. That's part of the reason why I've started the trauma work that I'm doing and the Holistic Law Studios is how can we do it better? Because what the court is doing is it's destroying it. And a lot of times when the parents get to the point in time of hiring lawyers, they think that their problems are going to be solved by the court, and they are usually made quite worse. Because now you've got people that are getting paid for you to disagree. And lawyers don't know how to get you from your deep, deep emotional state, for the most part, your deep, deep emotional state of fear of losing that child. Mothers, the number of mothers that can't imagine society or what society or other women would say if they learn that you are not the primary caregiver. And the number of women and men in both situations that care what society will say, whether I have this or not, despite the fact that the circumstances will be bad for the kids. And we lose that based on the fear that people are going to think that we're a bad mom because we gave dad more time. All of this to say that the very beginning of the whole conversation is how do we get men before this circumstance happens, before the marriage breaks down, before we have to find out which kid's going to go with which parent, before we have to figure out how we can make in this economy 2 separate incomes that was providing for one household now be able to provide for many. Before we get to that point, can we start finding a way to have a different conversation? And that conversation is this. I would like to discuss right now my concept of the way I think about and the way I understand from my perspective the topic of toxic masculinity.